Yeah. Good.
So that's been
Yeah, for me it's very similar. Okay, so the environment part, I understand the environment is kind of your entire history, everything you've experienced in your life. I'm not sure what being greater than that means, other than making a decision that you want to change, I suppose. I don't know. But the body part, yeah, I think that's fairly clear. It's like, I think what was already said in my feeling is that, yeah, I understand that habits are a way of the brain conserving energy. I mean, I think that's a case. And so the brain is trying to conserve energy because it actually uses a lot of energy. And so when I try to change a habit, the brain doesn't like it. And that's actually the body you're talking about, right? And so exactly what I just heard is my experience is that it doesn't feel good making changes, and the feelings take a while to catch up. And persistence is actually the answer to break the habit and establish a new one.
Yeah.
So
That was excellent. So if you actually overlay your thought, your choice, your action, then the experience of looking in the mirror, or that feeling, you've identified right away of it's different. So, let's talk about when somebody says I'm angry, what actually happens, right? So I'm going to explain to you, if you could visualize for me an anatomy here, and we have somebody that's an expert on anatomy here, so
okay.
don't be too hard on me. So you have your brain, right? And there are three layers of the brain: the neocortex, the limbic brain, and the cerebellum that's connected to the spinal cord. And the spinal cord goes down, then you have your adrenal glands. And so when somebody says they're angry, we get this thought. So you can picture somebody. It doesn't have to be you. It could be, a boss or a coworker, an employee, a customer. And so now they generate a thought, right? I'm hurt. I'm not being treated fairly. My partner's doing something, and now the thought is I'm angry, and that generates neuropeptides, which then trigger neurohormones, which sends the signal down the spinal cord. And then once that hits the adrenal glands, then the feeling is there. Now the brain is going to generate even more thoughts. And when the neural networks in your brain start firing in a sequence, pattern, and combination, now it's being conditioned to send more thoughts and that feeling of I'm angry. And now you're starting to think, no, I'm really angry. I'm getting really bitter. And so I'm going to have even stronger thoughts and send more hormones down the spinal cord into the adrenal gland. Now you're pumping, really pumping the hormones of anger into your body. And now you're really mad. And now you're generating even more thoughts. And so the more the body's firing those neural networks, pattern, sequence, and combination, the more familiar it becomes. You're actually the body of anger. And it's very hard to change once all of that starts happening. You're conditioning the body to be familiar with the emotion of anger. And all that's being done by the thoughts that are generating the neurochemistry of anger. And so chemically, hormonally, the neuropeptides are being triggered, and the body really is a being. So now your personality at that point is one of anger. Yes or no?
Yeah, makes sense.
actually you've just described, and just looking, I see what happened with my reception when we cut. Going through it. So she previously worked in a shop. Not so much. How I describe for massage and procedures is much different for everyone else. So new thoughts. Okay. Her performance, how she had to change, she had to make choices to change. Okay. She chose not to. She didn't fit. She had problems. her behaviors as observed by my partner came, oh my God, she looks like she's going to change. Saying that she did. Because her choice was not to change. Not to change her thinking. So then her actions observed by everyone else, very unspotlight, much different than everybody. Together was not that fit. So there was no new experience. And actually, her last couple of days, she was very angry, screamed, made threats. I was quite angry and looked and can see on her face as a result. So I kind of followed that pattern of actions.
And those feelings now, that experience.
Yeah,
Other.
it kind of goes all through. So
Right.
you know, and so there's a lot of it comes in the choice. So you have to consciously make the choice to accept the new thought or allow it to come in, or to go with it. If you don't make that choice, then nothing else happens. Then you basically you have the new thoughts, but if you don't agree to the new choice, you go back to the same behaviors and to everything else. So instead of moving over, even though you have the new thoughts, if you don't agree with the choice, you fall back on the
If you don't change, you can't expect your life to change. So that was an excellent example. And I'm sure each of us could come up with another example in our life or certainly with someone else.
Yeah, I think the thing about anger is very interesting because that's something I hadn't really thought about so much. But in my case, I have a point of resentment where I feel like I'm really being cheated, and they're basically just prolonging the whole process and not process. It's my medical plan, which used to be really good, and all of a sudden they got a new CEO and everything's different, and so it's taken them 10 months to put something into a pending file. So anyway, and you know, it's like what you talked about. It's like I have that thought, and then I go like, yeah, I don't want to think that. But then it comes back, and I go, yeah, you know, really, these guys are bad people.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just kind of accelerates.
Sure.
I didn't know what the process was, but I certainly have experienced exactly that. I mean, it happened yesterday.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Jim. It's the thinking and feeling loop. It's
Right.
a thought and an emotion, memory, and an image. Right? It's a stimulus and a response.
Yeah, and the
Right.
peptides and adrenal gland and the whole deal. I didn't know that part.
Yeah, the adrenal
That makes
glands are
sense.
sending the hormones of stress and anger.
Right. Yeah.
And we can do the exact same thing with
And
the
it
emotion
doesn't
of
feel
guilt.
good too. That's the stress hormone, I guess. I mean, I don't like being angry. It's not fun.
Yeah. I'll jump into that
Yeah. Okay.
in 1 second. I love this.
Yeah, I
'cause
want to
you're
hear what
real-
the cure is for that one, but we'll get to
Yeah,
it.
we're-
Okay.
we'll talk about the living in stress
Yeah.
or living in creation in a second. So let's close off on what it means to be greater than time. So would you agree, if we're thinking about our problems, that we're now living in the past?
Yeah.
And so the problems are going to generate that feeling of I'm being cheated, or I'm guilty, or fear or anxiety, and then we're going to generate the very same thoughts to reinforce those feelings. And so, in order to be greater than our environment, number one is to be aware of all of our thoughts. Like, all of our thoughts are in our neocortex. Everything that's happened in our life is now a part of our environment, which is in our brain. And we talked about be greater than our body, which are the feelings, because the body becomes the mind of our emotions. And then the third one is to be greater than time. But Mark, you gave a great example of one change process. So let's look at a image of what that looks like. And whatever the change is we're trying to make in our life, from old self to new self, we call that crossing the river of change. Now, the hardest part about change is making a different choice than the day before. And as soon as we make that choice, you're going to feel very uncomfortable because our bodies are conditioned to the chemical continuity of the familiar emotions. And so this is how people can become addicted to the emotions of stress, of fear, of that thing or that person to reinforce that feeling. And before you know it, you can become addicted to a life you don't even like. And so it takes conscious energy and awareness to actually go through the change process. And the way to do that, the reason we say it's important to be greater than time. If we're living in the familiar past, then we're stuck. If we're taking what we already know and putting that on the future, we're also stuck. We're making the future predictable, and those are the habits. So conditioning keeps us stuck in the past, and habits will bring our familiar past to a predictable future. So then the only way to change, to be greater than time, is to be present. Into the moment that we call the generous present moment, called now. Yes or no?
Yeah, makes sense.
And so in this work, we say the only place to create is in the unknown. That means being fully present. To be greater than time means not being in the familiar past or not being in the predictable future. It means to truly be present. And that's going to feel uncomfortable at first because it's the unknown. We're neither in the familiar past or the predictable future. But this is the only place we can actually create from. And this is where the possibilities happen. Everybody with me? Do you want a short break or should we just continue? Up to you.
Okay, let's take a break.
There you go.
A short one.
There you go.
Decide.